Lonely CEO discovers transformative truth as twin sisters plea for leftovers reveals hidden joy. Mark Henderson stepped into his penthouse, the doors gliding shut behind him with an eerily smooth whisper that echoed in the emptiness. The city sprawled beneath him, a sea of lights and flickering electronics, but he felt utterly isolated. At 42, he had clawed his way to the top of a tech empire, but what had been a trophy of success now felt like a cage. In boardrooms filled with numbers, he felt his heart ever more desolate, like a vacant seat left in the spot where dreams once thrived. After another grueling day of power plays and calculations, a knock resonated against the cold steel doors of his fortress. Irritation pricked at Mark's temples. Who dared disturb his solitude? When he opened the door, two faces, round and bright, smiled up at him. Brianna and Elsa, twin sisters from the nearby neighborhood, with innocent eyes that glimmered with hope. They asked for leftovers, a simple plea that pulsed a stir of annoyance within him. What a nuisance, he thought. Yet as he reluctantly engaged with them, their chatter painted a world bursting with joy. Their laughter was like music he hadn't realized he missed, a symphony of simple pleasures. He listened to their stories of school, of dreams bigger than the concrete walls enclosing them. It struck him, painfully, that while he was surrounded by wealth, these girls sought connection, community in their struggles. He saw how their mother's resilience, handling multiple jobs to provide, was teaching them to appreciate moments most people take for granted. There was something raw and unfiltered in their lives, a stark contrast to the sterile negotiations he participated in daily. With each shared meal, laughter filled the room, pushing against the walls where silence had reigned. As Mark handed over his uneaten gourmet dinners, their audacity and innocence cut through the layers of his discontent. Their small joys began to ripple through his own lonely existence, awakening a long-dormant longing. Was this what he had sacrificed? But then, an ominous shift darkened his perspective. A scandal broke, threatening his company and reputation. Headlines blared accusations of greed and corruption involving practices he'd overlooked for profit margins. The pressure mounted, squeezing the air from his lungs. Mark found himself at a crossroads, consumed by a brutal dilemma. Should he preserve his crumbling empire or champion the values the twin sisters embodied? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As he pondered his direction, he felt his corporate facade splintering. The calculating edge he had donned forced him to confront fears that loomed large: sacrifice his wealth and prestige, or align himself with the girls and their unabashed love for life. The laughter he had recently cherished dangled precariously against a backdrop of his high-stakes world. In moments of solitude, Mark's mind raced with childhood memories of carefree moments running through neighborhoods, laughter untainted by greed now flaring in stark contrast to the sterile hallways of his empire. Did he have it in him to turn his back on the success he'd fought for? Or would he choose the comforting grip of money, the dangerous allure of power? As despair mingled with determination, the stakes escalated, the consequences of his decision narrowing his vision. The twins' innocent faces crept into his thoughts, begging him to confront the most crucial question: could he redefine what success meant, slipping away from the echoing void of his achievements? The uncertainty clawed at him, leaving him on the brink, desperate for a resolution that might never come. Mark stood in his penthouse, a vast expanse of glass and steel that mirrored his own emotional isolation. The city lights twinkled beneath him, each one a reminder of the disconnect he felt. As he mulled over the recent scandal, anxiety tore at his stomach like a feral animal, threatening to consume him whole. The ethical implications of the accusations pressed heavily on his mind, urging him to scrutinize every decision he had made leading up to that moment. The sisters' laughter echoed sweetly through his thoughts, contrasting his current turmoil. Those fleeting moments spent with Brianna and Elsa became a beacon of hope amidst the shadow of impending fallout. Their innocence had sparked a flicker of understanding. Perhaps success wasn't merely a bank balance or a stock price. Perhaps it was something deeper, something that nurtured the soul. He paced, anxiety fueling his movements. Mark's hands clasped together tightly behind his back as he tried to envision what real success could be. Could it include aligning his company's values with those of the girls who had unknowingly reignited a flicker within him? This question spiraled in a loop, refusing to allow him to settle. Suddenly, a realization grabbed hold of him like a vice. His wealth had become a mask, blinding him to the needs of the world around him. He was a puppeteer, but the strings he used to control everything were taut with greed rather than connection. Looking out over the sprawling city, he felt a yearning arise for something more meaningful. He had spent so long chasing power that he lost sight of the very essence of leadership, serving others. He looked down at the kitchen table where the last of an extravagant meal from weeks past lay abandoned, another testament to his indulgences. He had been so wrapped up in himself that he hadn't seen the hungry need for empathy that lurked nearby. Did he have the courage to transform his approach? To defy the conventional narrative of success that had been handed to him? The instinct to fight back against the scandal loomed in his consciousness, but should he fight for his career or fight for something greater? With resolve building within him like a storm, Mark decided to take a stand. If he couldn't right the wrongs of his company, then it wasn't worth the success he had achieved. He was determined to not only distance himself from the toxic practices that had infected his empire but also to entwine himself with the community he had distanced himself from. There was a sense of urgency now, a lightning bolt of clarity that ignited his mind. Mark was ready to reach out, not just to the sisters but to those who had become invisible in the pursuit of his own achievements. He envisioned a plan to transform his company from the inside out, to advocate for transparency, community engagement, and ethical practices that inspired trust. Standing at the threshold of his penthouse, Mark felt the thrill of possibility coursing through him. The twins' laughter danced in his ears as he faced the reality of the outside world, one fraught with peril but also with untold potential. He was prepared to meet it head-on. However, as he began sketching a path forward, doubts nagged at him like gnats buzzing around his mind. Could he truly reinvent himself and his empire before it was too late? The looming threat of the scandal now felt like less of an enemy and more of a catalyst. But time was running out, his company was dangling on the edge of disaster. Would he find the strength to enact this change, or would the weight of his past decisions plunge him deeper into the abyss? The clock was ticking, and the stage was set for a confrontation not just with external forces, but with the very essence of who he had become. Could he navigate this treacherous path toward redemption, or would the shadows of his ambition consume everything he was striving to rebuild? Mark's resolve solidified as he stepped out of his penthouse, the cool night air a stark contrast to the warm, suffocating solitude he had grown accustomed to. He felt the pulsating heartbeat of the city beneath his feet as he walked aimlessly at first, his mind racing through strategies and possibilities. What did it mean to be a leader when your empire is built on shaky foundations? Each step echoed the truth that he needed to confront. The only legacy that truly stood the test of time was one that reflected integrity and purpose. Determined to initiate change, he sought out his first step, his corporate board. Arranging the meeting, he felt the weight of skepticism pressing down on him. These were the same individuals who thrived on profit margins and cutthroat tactics, their loyalty rooted in greed. Would they even entertain the notion of a transformation? As he sat at the head of the sleek, glass conference table, he was acutely aware of how different he was now from the man who once relished the thrill of high-stakes dealings. He began to speak, his voice steady yet raw, each word carrying the weight of his awakening. "We have lost our way," he declared, scanning the faces around him. "We are in a critical moment, more than just a scandal. It's about our identity. It's about our responsibility." The board members exchanged puzzled glances, a mix of disbelief and concern flickered in their eyes. Mark pressed on. "We have an opportunity to redefine ourselves, to build a company known for integrity, transparency, and empathy." As he spoke, he embraced the vulnerability that came with exposing his new vision, shedding fear just as he had cast aside the irrelevant attachments to wealth and status. Their responses were predictable, rooted in a lack of understanding. "What you're suggesting will cost us," one executive blurted out, arms crossed defensively. "Our shareholders won't back this." "It's all about the numbers," Mark thought, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. But rather than surrendering to the familiar patterns of debate, he forged ahead with an audacious proposal, a pivot towards socially responsible investments, outreach programs, and a fundamental overhaul of internal practices. Change won't come without risk, he acknowledged, feeling a swell of conviction. But within the risk lies growth. We need to be the change we claim to want in the world. He highlighted the bleak repercussions of ignoring this moment, how companies falter when they lose touch with their community and their values. Yet, the further he ventured, the more he wrestled with internal doubts. He sensed that for every progressive idea he championed, there was a voice inside him questioning whether he could truly lead this charge successfully. Sneaking glances at the clock on the wall, he felt the weight of time bearing down on him. Hesitation is weakness, he reminded himself, the mantra ringing clear as he jolted himself into motion. After a long discussion filled with heated arguments and lukewarm acceptance, the board finally agreed to a smaller pilot program, one that would serve as a testing ground for his ambitious vision. Though it wasn't everything he had imagined, it was a start, a foothold. But as he left the meeting, a nagging sense of uncertainty clung to him. What if this was all just a facade? What if he didn't have the depth of character to carry through the changes he had initiated? Until now, he had been a master of manipulation and strategy. Could he pivot to humility and service? Mark returned to his apartment, filled with the weight of both promise and doubt. He had made a small step, yet the path ahead still lay shrouded in fog. As he slumped against the wall, the laughter of the sisters echoed in his thoughts again. Could their hopeful innocence propel him towards the kind of leadership he aspired to embody? Tomorrow, he promised himself, he would pay them a visit, embark on a new kind of engagement that stemmed from genuine connection. As he drifted into sleep, the challenges that awaited him danced at the edges of his consciousness. Could he step outside his bubble of authority and reach into the depths of his own humanity? The next morning would bring fresh doubts, but in his heart, he knew the real battle for redemption had only just begun. In this world of corporate maneuvering, would his newfound empathy guide him effectively, or would it expose him to vulnerabilities he had long avoided? With a deep breath, he prepared for what promised to be a day of profound discovery. The morning light sliced through the windows of Mark's apartment, illuminating the disarray left by the night's restless thoughts. As he dressed, a flurry of questions spiraled in his mind. What would he say to the sisters? How could he authentically connect with them when his world was so meticulously structured around profit and loss? He was on the precipice of an unfamiliar territory, one where the usual metrics of success held little weight against the profound desire for genuine connection. After a quick breakfast, he exited his building with an urgency fueled by both anticipation and trepidation. The streets felt alive, their vibrancy contrasting sharply with his own internal turmoil. Each passerby represented an opportunity he had long neglected. Each person was a story, a reality intertwined with his own. Instinctively, he reached into his coat pocket, his fingers brushing against his wallet. The thought of cash so easily exchanged for tangible goods was foreign to him now. What he truly sought was the richness of human experience. Navigating toward the neighborhood where he had met the sisters, Mark replayed their faces in his mind, the laughter, the hope, the purity of their ask for what others discarded. It had shaken something loose inside him, an urgency to align his profession with these simple yet profound values. Arriving at what he remembered to be their small apartment complex, he hesitated at the door, steeling himself for the visit. What if they saw right through him? What if this was another attempt to distract himself from deeper issues? His discomfort amplified as he climbed the stairs, with each step feeling like a resistance against his polished corporate persona. When he finally knocked, exhilaration and anxiety joined forces within him. Moments felt like hours before he heard footsteps and the door opened slightly. There was Ava, her bright eyes meeting his with an unmistakable spark of recognition. "Mr. Mark!" she exclaimed, completely unbothered by his title. He felt a jolt. How refreshing it was to hear his name in that way, devoid of pretension. "Hi, Ava," he replied, forcing a smile. "Is your sister home?" "Yes." "Come in," she chirped, pulling him inside as if he were a long-lost friend instead of a visitor of the corporate world. The space was small, modestly decorated, but radiated warmth. As soon as he stepped in, the aroma of something cooking wafted gently toward him, grounding him further. Lizzie, Ava's twin, emerged from the kitchen with flour dusting her cheeks, and the expression on her face reminded him of innocence meeting curiosity. "Mark! You're back," Lizzie said, her excitement palpable. "We were just making some treats for our neighbors." His heart swelled as he observed them in their element. They were creating joy from such simple ingredients. They could teach him so much about life outside of boardrooms, outside profits. "Can I help?" he blurted out, surprising himself. This would be a departure from the normal business discussions he engaged in, but perhaps that was precisely what he needed. They nodded eagerly, and he found himself pitching in, following their lead. The laughter flowed easily as they shared the process, measuring, mixing, and tasting. Yet as they worked, a nagging voice whispered in the back of his mind, questioning the authenticity of this moment. Was he merely playing a part, or had he genuinely embraced this shift toward deeper connections? The existential tug-of-war flickered within him, but here, amidst flower and laughter, it felt less daunting. As they baked, the sisters shared stories of their lives' small victories, struggles, and their leanings towards contributing meaningfully to their community. It was a refreshing narrative that disarmed him, one that masked no illusions. Mark began to see a clear reflection of his own journey in their lives. But the revelry took a turn when Lizzie looked at him earnestly and asked, "Do you think you can change things at your company, Mr. Mark? Like you said you wanted to?" It was a gut punch, a reminder that the path ahead remained fraught with uncertainty. Could he truly instigate the change he hoped for? Mark paused, the playfulness slipping away momentarily. "I want to. But it's hard. Sometimes I wonder if I have what it takes to lead, to truly make a difference." The twins exchanged nervous glances. But then Ava, embodying the fierceness of youthful optimism, squeezed his hand and said, "You can. You just have to take it one step at a time." As he looked into their bright, encouraging eyes, a surge of conviction coursed through him. Could it really be that simple? But even as hope blossomed, doubt danced in the corners of his mind. He was embarking on a journey that was a leap of faith, one that now carried the weight of their expectations. Walking out of their apartment, Mark realized he had not just engaged with them but had taken a firmer step toward himself. Yet the future loomed. He had shown them his desire to change, but would he be able to sustain that commitment when returning to the stark realities of his corporate world? With deliberation, he took a deep breath, feeling the burden of both promise and dread. The true test awaited him as he stepped back into the hustle and bustle of the city. Would he rise to the occasion, or would the easier path of indifference call him back? The time had come to confront not just the skeptics at his board, but himself, as he prepared for the inevitable challenge of solidifying his new identity. Would this day, filled with hope and reflection, become a turning point, one that tested the foundations of who he truly was? The sun had barely set when Mark found himself standing in front of the glass doors of his corporate office once again. The anxiety that had trailed him back from the sisters' apartment now amplified in the sterile, fluorescent-lit atmosphere. He could still hear their laughter, feel the warmth of their connection, and yet here he was, tethered to a world that thrived on figures, reports, and cutthroat decisions. As he stepped inside, the familiar buzz of corporate life enveloped him like a cold blanket. Colleagues rushed past, eyes glued to their screens, minds consumed by deadlines. He was merely an observer in this sea of ambition and detachment, grappling with the remnants of his encounter with Ava and Lizzie. The sensation of being adrift tightened within him. Why was he so drawn to their simplicity? As he settled at his desk, the question gnawed at him: had he become so enmeshed in his career that he lost sight of humanity? His responsibilities loomed over him, but the clarity he found in the kitchen seemed to melt away under the weight of quarterly reports. Mark opened his laptop, the glow illuminating his weary expression. He scrolled through emails, preparing for the upcoming board meeting. Everything felt mechanical. Yet, amidst the spreadsheets and projections, a thought flickered to life. What if he imbued even a fraction of the warmth from the sisters' world into this one? With a surge of impulsive energy, he began drafting a new proposal. It was unconventional, centered around creating community outreach programs within the company. His intention suddenly became clear. He wanted to encourage a culture that valued connections, an extension of what he had felt in their small kitchen. However, he paused. Would they see it as mere corporate fluff, a last-ditch effort to maintain relevance in a soulless industry driven by profit? As he typed, he could hear Lizzie's question echo in his mind: "Do you think you can change things?" The intensity of that challenge unfurled within him, pressing him to push past his own self-doubt. The more he wrote, the more he began to sense the gravity of what he was asking himself to do. It felt as though he was standing on the edge of a precipice, one foot hovering above the past he knew so well, and the other dipping bravely into the unknown, but moments before he hit send on the proposal, a paralyzing thought gripped him. The board might dismiss his ideas outright, they might stifle his burgeoning vision with cynicism. The prospect of facing such judgment was daunting, a chilling reminder of the stakes involved in challenging the status quo. Would he be willing to risk his standing within the company for the chance at something that might hold the warmth and joy he had experienced earlier? As if in answer, he caught sight of a post-it note on his desk, a casual reminder to value connections. It had been a call to network originally, but now it struck him differently, a reminder that every person, every colleague, was a story waiting to unfold. The fear of exposure loomed large, but so did the potential for change. With newfound determination, Mark pressed send, feeling an exhale of tension release from his shoulders. The decision hung in the air like an unanchored balloon, uncertain yet exhilarating. He had taken a step, a fragile leap into a realm that stoked both anxiety and hope. As he stared at the screen, waiting for acknowledgement, he couldn't shake the gnawing sensation that this was merely the opening act in a larger performance. What awaited him in the boardroom? Would the sister's spirit of resilience inspire others, or would he be chastised for his audacity? In that moment, another email popped up, a response from the board chair. Mark's heart raced as he opened it, feeling the gravity of the words leap off the screen. The time had come to face not only the board but the values that underpinned his professional identity. Yet he braced himself, knowing that this was only the beginning of a deeper and more complicated journey. The challenge he feared now became the fuel for his emergence, an invitation to unearth his authenticity amidst the corporate grind. But could he really navigate this new path, or would the uncertainty of change pull him back into familiar confines? As he closed his laptop, a single thought crystallized: this was not just about the proposal anymore, it was about transforming himself. The real battle had just begun. Mark realized that his next encounter with the board could very well redefine him, perhaps even reveal the man he had yet to fully become. Mark felt the weight of anticipation pressing against his chest as he entered the boardroom the following day. The air was thick with a mixture of stale coffee and the faint scent of polished wood, reminiscent of countless previous meetings where ambition and pragmatism often clashed like titans. Yet today, it was different. Today, he was not just a vessel for numbers and reports, he was a voice for the humanity that he feared was slipping away. As he took his seat, he noticed his colleagues settling in, exchanging knowing glances, the murmurs of speculation swirling like a storm. They had received his proposal. The challenge felt monumental, yet a flicker of hope ignited within him. This was his moment to bridge the gap between their world and the warmth of the sister's kitchen. The board chair, a stern man with an unforgiving gaze, cleared his throat. "Thank you for joining us today. Mark, I believe you have a proposal regarding our outreach initiatives?" Mark nodded, gripping the edges of the table as he stood, every muscle taut with tension. "Thank you. I believe we have an opportunity not just to improve our public image, but to truly connect with our employees and our community." His voice steadied with each word, instilling a rhythm of purpose into the presentation. As he laid out his proposal, focused on establishing programs that fostered human connections through volunteer work and sharing of skills, he could feel the skepticism simmering in the room. He recalled Lizzie's challenge and leaned into it. What if we created a culture where employees felt valued not just for their output but for their stories? In a world increasingly driven by numbers, we risk losing our greatest asset, our people. An ominous silence filled the room, and Mark felt a knot forming in his stomach. Were they resonating with his fervor or dismissing him outright? The board chair interrupted, the sharpness of his voice cutting through Mark's hopeful rhetoric. "Let us be clear, you're advocating for a shift in our priorities?" In a corporate environment, this could easily be perceived as naive. Each word hit Mark like a slap. The tension that had gathered in the pit of his stomach twisted further. Behind the chairperson's critique lay an unyielding belief in the cold efficiency of their business model, a doctrine that promised success, but at what cost? He had anticipated resistance, but hearing it articulated so starkly forced him to confront a deeper fear. Would he let this man's dismissal snuff out the flame he had ignited within himself? Or would he stand his ground? Mark took a breath, channeling the warmth of Ava and Lizzie's laughter, grounding himself in the idea that he was not just advocating for change, he was advocating for a reclamation of human connection. "I don't believe it's naive," he asserted, voice unwavering. "I believe it's essential. Perhaps now, more than ever." A murmuring crept around the table as colleagues exchanged glances. He sensed curiosity painted with skepticism, but the seed of interest had taken root. To his surprise, another board member, a younger colleague he admired, piped up. "What if we approach this from a pilot perspective? Try it out in one department and assess the impact on productivity and morale?" Mark seized the moment, heart racing. Exactly. If we can demonstrate a correlation between emotional investment and financial performance, we could reshape our entire company culture. As discussions continued, he felt a crack forming in the rigid facade of the board. Ideas bounced around the table. For once, the room erupted with energy instead of confrontation. The sense of possibility began to surge, and Mark recognized the potential for something transformative, a shared exploration rather than a defensive stance. By the end of the meeting, he felt different, not merely as a disillusioned employee in a suit but as an instigator of potential change. While the final decision was yet to be made, the dialogue itself felt like victory. Walking out of the boardroom, adrenaline coursed through his veins. He hadn't just presented a proposal, he initiated a conversation about identity, value, and connection. Yet one question plagued him: had he truly shifted minds or simply awakened buried doubts about their way of doing business? As the day crept on, Mark replayed moments from the presentation in his mind, the elation of possibility dashed with the looming shadow of complacency that still clung to many. He began to wonder if he was merely scratching the surface of something much larger. His phone buzzed with an upcoming unexpected call, a call that could lead to further conversations or even adversarial pushback, depending on how others interpreted his ideas. The stakes were climbing higher, but so was his resolve. And as Mark braced for whatever came next, a single thought lingered in his mind: he was no longer at the helm of his own ship, but navigating through uncharted waters where he could either flourish or flounder. What awaited him on the other side of the call? Would he rise as a champion of change, or find himself lost in the currents of corporate resistance? The vibration from his phone broke Mark's train of thought. He glanced down, seeing Lizzie's name flashing on the screen. Memories of laughter, warmth, and shared meals flooded his mind, shaking off the weight of the boardroom's skepticism. He answered, eager to escape the corporate confines for a brief moment. "Hey, Mark. I just wanted to check in after the meeting," she said, her voice a bright beacon. "Thanks, Lizzie. I'm still processing it all. It felt like a breakthrough, but I can't shake the fear that they might just brush it aside." A pause lingered on the line as Lizzie considered his words. "You've ignited something in there, I can feel it. Remember, real change starts with conversation, and you open that door." Her encouragement was a warm embrace, anchoring him amidst the whirlwind of uncertainty. "I hope so. But what if I'm just a voice in the crowd?" He felt his defenses lowering. "Someone else will come along and smother the ideas before they even take root." "Then our voices need to be louder," she countered, her determination dancing through the phone. "Keep talking. Keep proposing. Our restaurant has flourished because we always prioritized the personal touch. That will serve us well in any relationship, especially in business." As they hung up, Mark felt a renewed sense of possibility. The path to transformation wouldn't be easy, but he could now see it winding ahead, dotted with potential insights and outstretched hands. Yet as he settled back into work, the anxiety crept back. A barrage of emails awaited him, filled with mundane requests that suffocated his earlier inspiration. It struck him that his corporate environment, suffused with numbers and graphs, was a stark contrast to Lizzie's vibrant kitchen, infused with aroma, laughter, and genuine human connection. He found himself longing not just for balance but a revolution, a complete makeover of his professional identity. Taking a decisive breath, he opened a new document. The words flowed more confidently this time, each keystroke realigning his vision for the company. He drafted potential initiatives, brainstorming ways to foster a sense of belonging among employees, weaving together the threads Lizzie had woven into the very fabric of her cafe. As Mark pushed through the layers of corporate protocol, a troubling thought lingered: had he made himself too vulnerable? Every suggestion felt like peeling back layers, exposing raw emotions, while the boardroom could easily swallow him whole. But the idea of boldness propelled him forward. He wondered if exposing his humanity could revitalize the sterile corridors where he worked. Hours evaporated as he progressed, drafting proposals and envisioning employee appreciation days filled with shared stories, all culminating into a tapestry of human connection. Yet the specter of doubt loomed larger in his mind. What if the board pushed back harder than before? What if they recognized his plan for what it was, a threat to the status quo? Just as he finished editing the latest proposal, a second buzz interrupted his thoughts. He glanced down. It was an incoming email from the board chair. His fingers, trembling ever so slightly, clicked it open. "Mark, we'd like to invite you back for an additional discussion regarding your proposal. There are some concerns we'd like to address. Please confirm your availability for tomorrow morning." Regret mixed with determination as Mark mulled over the implications. These concerns could either signify a chance to refine his ideas or a potentially hostile confrontation. The stakes were high, but retreating now would feel like a betrayal to everything he had begun to build both personally and professionally. He steeled himself. This was his moment to either safeguard what felt like a fragile, burgeoning dream or to confront the doubts that had lingered in the corners of the boardroom. The internal debate crescendoed within him. To stand firm meant to risk being labeled a troublemaker. To withdraw could mean silencing the passion that had catalyzed a shift in the conversation, with resolve clenching. His stomach, Mark replied to the email. "I'm available." The click of send reverberated through him, fusing doubt with determination. A new wave surged within him, invigorated by the anticipation of the challenge ahead. The time had come to face not just the board but the hidden facets of his own vision and the radical commitment to lead the charge for change. Yet with this newfound courage came an unsettling realization. Would he be ready for the pushback, or was he unwittingly venturing into the lioness den? What awaited him in the morning could reshape everything he was fighting for. Would he emerge a champion of change, or would he find himself outmatched by the very culture he sought to transform? The morning light pierced through the office blinds, casting sharp shadows along the walls as Mark entered the boardroom. The atmosphere was charged, heavy with anticipated conflict. The long polished table loomed before him, flanked by faces that had both inspired and intimidated him since his first day. He breathed in, feeling the freshness of his resolve collide with the stale air filled with expectation and doubt. As he took his seat, he mentally reviewed his proposal, careful to structure it in a way that addressed potential objections while highlighting the transformative power of connection within the workplace. If he could just make them see the human element, the value in vulnerability and authenticity, perhaps he could turn this tide in his favor. The chairperson, an imposing figure who embodied the very essence of corporate rigidity, nodded for the meeting to commence. "Mark, thank you for joining us again. We have read your proposal. Let us address our concerns." Mark's stomach nodded slightly, but he refrained from fidgeting. As they began to dissect the document, he listened intently, keen on reading the room. Objections flew across the table like arrows, each directed at what they perceived as impractical or risky. Morale might rise, but can we track productivity and profits simultaneously? Questioned Alice, a senior exec whose focus was strictly on numbers. "Exactly," echoed James, another board member who thrived within the status quo. "You're suggesting a shift that could disrupt our system. We cannot gamble on employee well-being when our shareholders expect profit margins." Their words stung, but there was clarity in how they viewed the world. Parts of him had shared that perspective before. "But I believe we can create a balance," he countered firmly, gesturing with purpose. "If we deepen employee engagement, the productivity will follow. The cafe I mentioned is thriving not merely due to good food but because it cultivates relationships. People feel invested when they are valued." An uneasy murmur rippled through the room. Mark could almost sense a shift, perhaps a seed of challenge had taken root in their minds. Apologies were unnecessary, but he pressed on, laying bare the personal stories behind his inspiration, memories of Lizzie's bustling cafe filled with laughter and warmth. Each recounting imparted a piece of his own longing for connection, revealing his vulnerability yet aiming at strengthening his case. The conversation ebbed and flowed, at times faltering under the weight of hard numbers, but Mark kept redirecting it back to the human experience. His pulse quickened when he detected small nods from two board members, spurring a hidden energy within him to forge ahead. "I'm not asking for a blind leap," Mark stated, eyes scanning each face. "This is about re-evaluating how we define success. It's about weaving in empathy amidst the graphs and data." As the meeting continued, Mark felt the atmosphere fluctuate. Skepticism was not eliminated, but it was being challenged. There was an awakening of sorts, an acknowledgement of the potential that lay within the unknown. Would they embrace a new narrative, or would they continue to cling to the comfort of old paradigms? The meeting waned to a close, the board members expressing the need for further discussion before making a final decision. Mark left the room feeling simultaneously deflated and invigorated, the flicker of hope ignited within him lingering like an ember. He couldn't shake off the questions: had he ignited any real passion, or simply laid bare his dreams to an indifferent audience? The duality of progress and regression spun in his mind, reminding him of the balance he sought not just in business but within himself. As he sank into his chair, weary but resolute, he recalled Lizzie's voice urging him to persist. This was just one battle in a larger war for change. Yet the fear pricked at him: what if the ultimate ambition turned into a mirage? Would his hope for connection and authenticity dissolve under the weight of indifference, leaving him defending a castle built on sand? The stakes were settling high once more. A clarity pressed upon him: the real challenge lay ahead, beyond the boardroom walls. He had to explore his own potential, understanding that true leadership wouldn't flourish just from ideas but from embodying them, dismantling barriers one conversation at a time. Determination sparked anew, gripping him with fierce clarity. It was time to reach out once more, leaning into those connections he so desperately craved. An idea began formulating, a daring invitation that would unfold opportunities not just in the corporate realm but in his personal journey. With a newfound steely focus, he drafted a message to Lizzie, ready to welcome her insight as a partner in change. As he typed and hit send, Mark realized the path for progress would be paved with collaboration and authenticity, turning each fear into a stepping stone. What awaited when he connected his world with hers could very well redefine everything he'd been striving for. Would their combined vision carve out a space to thrive, nourishing possibilities at every turn? Mark sat at his desk, the hum of fluorescent lights buzzing in his ears as he replayed the boardroom debates in his mind. The contrast between the sterile environment of the corporate office and the vivacious warmth of Lizzie's cafe loomed large. Each critique from the board echoed like a hammer striking an objection to his vision, yet within him, a spark flickered. He had taken a step forward not through the rigid approval of his peers, but by bearing not just ideas, but his authentic self. His phone vibrated, pulling him from his thoughts. A message notification from Lizzie appeared. "Hey, Mark. I'd love to catch up. Can we meet tomorrow? I have some ideas to share too." The warmth of her invitation felt like a gentle nudge toward clarity. The confidence that had flickered during the meeting now danced actively beneath his skin. Mark sat back, contemplating the implications of this collaboration. He recognized that the meeting had challenged not only the board's perceptions but had awakened something dormant within him, a leadership style rooted in genuine connection rather than authority alone. Mark envisioned their meeting pulsating with energy. Lizzie had always inspired him with her ability to create an environment that welcomed spontaneity and open dialogue. As he considered the potential exchange of ideas, he realized that tapping into her perspective was essential to forging a path forward. This wasn't merely about altering boardroom dynamics, it was about redefining his personal philosophy. The drive to meet her consumed him with purpose. For years, he had exiled vulnerabilities, equating them with weakness. Yet contemplating Lizzie's resilience against the harsh realities of managing her cafe where every interaction held the power to uplift or diminish, he grasped how leaders must embrace their humanity. Still, remnants of doubt remained. Would Lizzie truly appreciate his aspirations, much less partner with him in this endeavor? The thought gnawed at him, every pulse questioning the validity of his vision. Mark pulled open a drawer and retrieved a blank notepad. He had learned that reflecting through writing often clarified his thoughts. As words flowed, he realized he feared failure not from being misunderstood, but from failing to express the depth of his intention. Days of calculated risk and strategic discussions had trained him to view the world through a scrutinous lens. What if he allowed himself to explore this unfiltered clarity, nurturing a space where collaboration and creativity were at the forefront? When he glanced at the clock, he was surprised to see minutes cascading into hours. His heart raced as he pictured the vulnerability required to openly share his vision with Lizzie. She often spoke about her struggles, the mistakes as fuel for growth, and Mark felt an innate responsibility to mirror that honesty in their conversations. The following day, he arrived at Lizzie's cafe 10 minutes early. The air was laced with the intoxicating scent of brewing coffee, blending seamlessly with the laughter of patrons. It was a stark contrast to the sterile walls of his office. He felt the tension in his shoulders ease as he took a moment to observe the animated exchanges around him. Each interaction breathed life into his aspiration. When Lizzie walked in, her energy radiated like sunlight bursting through clouds. She approached him, eyes sparkling, and said, "I can't wait to hear what you've come up with." "We're on the brink of something amazing, aren't we?" "Yes," Mark replied, surprising himself with his assertiveness. "But it's not just about those plans. I need to share something personal with you." As they nestled into a corner booth, Mark resolved to discard his fears, welcoming the possibility of an authentic exchange. This conversation could be pivotal, setting the stage for a partnership that delved deeper than business interests, probing into how their respective journeys could intertwine, because for the first time, he understood, he wasn't merely an isolated executive yearning for approval, he was a man on a quest to redefine leadership. As their dialogues meandered between ideas and story, he braced himself. Would this willingness to reveal his ambition and vulnerability unlock the doors to a richer, collective vision? And as those first words tumbled forth, he couldn't shake off the thunderous question framing their conversation: would they embark on this journey of transformation together, or was this bravely stepping into the unknown merely a step closer to heartache? Mark stood tall in the boardroom, a distinct aura of confidence surrounding him. The noises of skepticism and doubt from before had transformed into a backdrop against which he found clarity. After months of reflection, he had confronted the true essence of leadership, one that thrived on connection, vulnerability, and humanity. The resistance from his colleagues had merely challenged him to solidify his stance, deepen his resolve, and formulate a clearer vision. "Thank you for allowing me to present my insights again," Mark began, his voice steady. He felt empowered by the recent conversations with Lizzie. What had initially felt daunting now flowed naturally, igniting a connection not merely to the figures on the screen, but to the very heart of the matter. As he detailed the pilot initiative centered on community engagement and emotional intelligence within the workplace, Mark could sense the shift. No longer was he merely advocating for a theoretical concept, he was embodying a narrative of change that resonated with the collective yearning for authentic leadership. His colleagues listened, their expressions shifting as he recounted the lessons learned from the sisters, the laughter shared over flour-dusted countertops, and the simplicity of forming genuine bonds. A wave of expressions played across the room, some reflecting skepticism, others tentative curiosity. Yet, as he spoke, something remarkable happened. The dialogue shifted, it ventured into a space ripe with open inquiry. His peers began to reflect not just on the financial implications but the ethical responsibilities of leadership. A board member raised a thought-provoking question: how will we track the impact of these initiatives on our bottom line? Mark seized the opportunity. What if we redefine success metrics? He proposed. Not solely based on profit, but on the enhancement of employee engagement, well-being, and community trust? What if these elements became our new compass? His words hung in the air, igniting a flicker of interest. He could see wheels turning in their minds, they were beginning to reflect beyond the walls of conventional metrics. In that moment, he realized it was about revolutionizing the narrative, shifting the focus from disconnection to connection. He articulated specific goals: community service participation rates, employee satisfaction surveys, and a commitment to transparency. As the meeting reached its zenith, Mark took a moment to acknowledge the heart of the discussion. This isn't just about company reputation, it's about our legacy as leaders. We owe it to ourselves, our employees, and our communities to stand for something greater than profit. When the meeting concluded, a palpable air of possibility lingered. The board expressed a willingness to embrace the pilot initiative, their hesitance slowly morphing into cautious optimism. Mark exited the boardroom, a corner of his heart swelling with pride. He felt an exhilarating mix of relief and triumph. He had effectively sparked a new conversation. The journey to transformation had only just begun, but he no longer felt alone in its pursuit. He had found allies in unexpected places, encouraging him to delve deeper into his new leadership identity. Days later, the boardroom buzzed with energy as they prepared for the pilot program launch. Employees felt invigorated, snapping up opportunities for community outreach, the new initiatives fostering a sense of excitement and purpose. Mark had witnessed a tangible shift within the culture of the company, a growing recognition that human connection was indeed entwined with productivity. Mark's personal growth was undeniable. He had stepped away from a cold profit-driven mindset towards one that harbored empathy and connection, challenging the very structure he had built his world around. The once judicious CEO who grappled with questions of inadequacy had morphed into a leader willing to expose his vulnerabilities for the greater good, but perhaps the most significant milestone was the heartfelt lunch shared with Lizzie at her cafe, where they dug deeper into their collaborative vision. Mark had invited her to speak with his team, bringing that warmth from her kitchen to the boardroom, merging two worlds into a cohesive mission of impact and transformation. Standing in that cafe, surrounded by laughter and the aroma of fresh coffee, Mark felt a sense of belonging and authentic connection to a vision greater than himself. With a grateful smile, Lizzie reminded him, "You should be proud. You've cultivated a new foundation. This is just the beginning." Hearing her words ignited an affirmation deep within him. Mark had proven to himself that true success was not merely tangible wealth, but a richness derived from fostering connections within both personal and professional realms. He had conquered the dissonance between his past and his present, establishing a solid confidence in the leadership role he now embraced. He stepped out of the cafe, a revitalized leader, ready to embark on the transformative journey ahead. The city buzzed around him, a chorus of voices weaving stories, each one a potential opportunity for connection, growth, and collective empowerment. The future gleamed with promise, and Mark was poised to navigate it, ready to inspire meaningful change starting with himself. Now, are you ready to step into your own transformative journey? You need to subscribe now for the next exclusive emotional stories that can inspire your personal growth. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, and comment your reactions and theories about this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful transformation. The power of personal overcoming stories echoes through connection. Help spread that message today.